Photograph from 1877 records the outlaw Billy the Kid in a gambling setting, in a saloon. On the left, he wears a white shirt, dark vest, and top hat. He is at the table with 3 companions. The 4 keep their hands under the tabletop, a gesture of caution. On the table, an almost empty liquor bottle indicates a long stay. Photograph from around 1890 shows 2 sex workers posing in a brothel in Alaska. During the westward expansion, flows of male migrants occupied frontiers in search of income. The demographic imbalance favored brothels run by madams, who organized rates, lodging, and internal rules. Photograph from 1885 portrays a company of Texas Rangers in a studio. Standardized uniforms and weapons suggest preparation for field service. The Corps, with jurisdiction throughout Texas, carried out border patrols, repression of banditry, and territorial conflicts, marking central episodes of the Old West. In 1878, a photograph records passers-by on a street in Dodge City. Like Deadwood, the town became a symbol of the frontier Old West in Kansas. There were numerous saloons and brothels. The reputation attracted gunmen and robbers. Traditions cite Billy the Kid and Jesse James among the visitors of the time. Photograph of Sheriff Patrick Floyd Jarvis Garrett, Pat Garrett. He served in Lincoln County, New Mexico Territory, and gained notoriety for killing William H. Bonney, Billy the Kid, in 1881. Garrett was shot dead near Las Cruces on February 29, 1908. Many regard him as one of the central sheriffs of the Old West. Photograph dated around 1880 shows a group of men in front of a saloon in Miles City, Montana, United States. On the frontier, the exhausting journey limited leisure. After work, only drinking and conversation remained. The scene highlights male sociability typical of expanding settlements of the period. Photograph from 1900. Businessmen pose with the famous 20-mule team. Double wagons pulled by 20 mules, used to carry borax from Harmony Borax Works in Death Valley to the railroad in Mojave. The scene illustrates the austere logistics of mining in the West, under the extreme and arid climate of California. Photograph taken in May 1862. A settler family poses in front of a wooden rural dwelling, in an area that then belonged to Nebraska Territory, before the creation of Custer County, 1877, and statehood, 1867. The image records typical clothing and utensils of the agricultural frontier. Photograph of Sitting Bull, Hunkpapa Lakota chief, central figure of resistance on the Great Plains in the 19th century. Alongside Sioux and Cheyenne, he mobilized thousands against the 7th U.S. Cavalry Regiment in 1876, a victory at Little Bighorn. He later sought refuge in Canada, returning in 1881. Photograph dated around 1907 shows a group of cowboys gathered at the counter, drinking and exchanging banter, served by a bartender. The scene takes place in a bar in Tascosa, Oldham County, in the Texas Panhandle, and highlights social and leisure practices typical of the American West in the early 20th century. Photographic record from around 1870 documents the arrival of migrants to the American West. In the scene, dozens of wagons advance in a column, driven by families and drivers. The group reaches a newly formed urban nucleus, still unnamed, a sign of territorial expansion and settlement routes. Taken in 1908, the photograph documents hunters in front of a rustic cabin in Arizona, accompanied by their hunting dogs. The clothing, bolt-action rifles, and trophies displayed suggest seasonal hunting, typical of the American West in the early decades of the 20th century, indicating camp sociability. Photograph dated around 1905 shows urban supply workers driving an animal-drawn cart. 2 men pull a large barrel, while another guides the vehicle on a dirt street. The scene highlights everyday methods of transporting water before the spread of piped networks. Studio portrait from 1875 shows the outlaw Jesse James, a former Confederate guerrilla and central figure of the James Younger Gang. He acted as a bank and train robber and was linked to homicides in Missouri. With a high bounty, he was killed in 1882 in his home in St. Joseph by Robert Ford of the gang. Photo from 1893 shows workers in a locality of the Oklahoma Territory receiving piped water for the first time. In a recent settlement, distribution required construction and coordination. The water tower under construction, core of the system, would ensure pressure and regularity for the community's initial supply. Photograph from 1904 shows a Navajo dine group crossing Canyon de Chelly in northeastern Arizona territory of the Navajo Nation. The scene documents roots of mobility and herding in the early 20th century, when federal policies and trading posts reshaped practices and movements, linked to expeditions and ethnographic studies. Photograph from the early 20th century shows passers-by on Main Street in Manhattan, Nye County, in the high desert of Nevada. The town arose in 1867 with the discovery of silver nearby. The 1905 gold rush generated a new settlement boom. More than 4,000 inhabitants quickly established themselves. Record from 1900, in an unidentified location in the American West. A group of cowboys can be seen gathered around the ranch cart, chuck wagon, at mealtime. Wide-brimmed hats, neckerchiefs, and holsters highlight fieldwork and trail culture. Photograph from 1873 shows inhabitants in front of a church on rocky outcrops in Zuni, Cibola County, desert of New Mexico. The scene is part of 19th century federal surveys and documents the territory where the Zuni people, Eshiwi, have lived for millennia, linking Pueblo layout to the arid landscape. Image from 1892 in a Pennsylvania brothel shows a sex worker seated in the service room. The author, a regular client, photographed the scene at an unspecified time. The portrait is part of the set of anonymous records on urban sociability at the end of the 19th century. Photograph from 1890 shows a large Sioux camp in South Dakota. The tents in a semicircle highlight clan organization and seasonal roots. The Sioux people, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, wove networks of trade and diplomacy. After 1889, the setting indicates mobility in the face of pressure from federal policies. Olive Oatman, young pioneer kidnapped in 1851. At 14, she saw her parents killed by Yavapais in present-day Arizona. She and her sister Mary Ann, age 7, were enslaved and, about a year later, traded to the Mojaves for horses. Among the Mojaves, she received facial tattoos. She was rescued only in 1856 near Fort Yuma. Photograph from 1869 shows a Native American in front of the first transcontinental railroad, completed in 1869 and linking California to the eastern United States. For urban elites and companies, it symbolized national integration. For many Native nations, territorial loss weakened sovereignty and community and cultural disruption. Image from 1878 shows the loading of buffalo hides in the hide yard of Dodge City, Kansas. The fur trade, driven by railroads and long-range rifles, led hunters to kill thousands, leaving carcasses on the open plains. The hides went on to tanning and export. In 1887, settler family in Nebraska posing in front of the facade of their house. Work and Sunday clothes contrast. Children in the center, adults on the edges. The frontal framing and daylight indicate a traveling studio and documentary intent of the period. California Gulch near Leadville, Colorado in 1880. District that evolved from alluvial gold of the 1860s to silver carbonate extraction. Shafts, galleries, and small smelters shaped the landscape. The arrival of narrow-gauge railroads integrated the field into trade routes and fueled Leadville's urban boom.